Right now, somewhere in your home, a bird is watching the door. It knows the sound of your car. It knows the specific creak of your shoes on the floor. And the moment it hears you coming, it starts to call. Not because it's hungry, not because something is wrong. It calls because, in its mind, a member of its group has been gone, and now that member is finally coming back. You call this animal your pet. You bought it a cage, you taught it tricks, you gave it a name. But here's the question almost nobody thinks to ask. What does it think you are? Not what you want it to think, not what you've trained it to do. What does the parrot actually believe is happening when you walk through that door? The answer involves one of the most unusual minds in the animal kingdom. And once you understand it, you may never hear your parrot speak your name the same way again. Let's start with something that seems obvious, but isn't. When your parrot talks to you, it is not doing what most people assume. The popular idea is that parrots are mimics, that they're copying sounds the way a tape recorder copies music, with no understanding of what any of it means. That idea has been largely demolished. And the person who did the demolishing spent 30 years in a lab with a single bird. In 1977, a young researcher named Irene Pepperberg walked into a pet store in Chicago and bought an African gray parrot. She named him Alex, short for Avian Language Experiment. At the time, the scientific consensus was that birds were not worth studying for complex cognition. Their brains were the size of a walnut. The assumption was that there wasn't much happening inside them. Pepperberg's first grant proposal came back with a reviewer asking what she was smoking. Literally, she kept going anyway. Over 30 years, Alex learned more than 100 English words. Not to recite them, to use them. He could look at an object he had never seen before and correctly identify its color, its shape, and what it was made of. He understood the concept of zero, something human children don't grasp until around age 4. When presented with an apple, a fruit he had no word for, he combined the words he knew for banana and cherry and called it a banary. He wasn't repeating. He was thinking. And here's the part that matters for our question. Alex didn't just learn to label the world. He learned to address the people in it. When Pepperberg's assistants made mistakes, Alex would correct them. He would tell them, "You're wrong," and speak clearly. He had favorites among the research team. He had moods. He had opinions. He had, by every measure researchers could find, something that looked a great deal like a social relationship with the humans around him. So what was Alex actually perceiving when he looked at Irene Pepperberg? Not a scientist, not an owner, not even a human, in any way he would have had a word for. What the evidence suggests is something stranger and more touching than that. In the wild, parrots are flock animals. Not in the casual sense, in the deep, biological sense. Their entire survival strategy is built around the group. They travel in flocks, sleep in flocks, raise young in flocks, and communicate in a constant, complex network of calls that lets each bird know exactly where the others are. A parrot separated from its flock isn't just lonely. It is, in the language of its own nervous system, in danger. When a parrot is brought into a human home, that ancient wiring doesn't switch off. It looks for a flock, and it finds one. Dr. Sharman Hops, a professor at the Texas A&M College of Veterinary Medicine, has put it plainly. Birds see their owners as part of the flock, not a stand-in for the flock, not a substitute. The actual flock. The humans in the house become, in the parrot's mind, its group. Its safety. Its reason to call when it hears the door. That calling you hear when you come home. That's a contact call. In the wild, it's how flock members announce themselves to each other after time apart. Your parrot isn't performing a trick it was taught. It's doing something it was built to do, checking that its flock is still intact. Now here is where it gets genuinely remarkable, because parrots don't just accept their human flock. They try to communicate with it. And the way they do that reveals something extraordinary about how they see us. In the wild, parrots have individual contact calls, sounds that function, researchers believe, almost like names. Each bird has a signature call that identifies it to the others. When flock members reunite, they exchange these calls. It's how they say, "I'm here. I know who you are. You belong with me." A study published in PLOS One, led by researchers from Copenhagen University, found that parrots immediately imitate the contact call of a specific individual they want to address. They use sound to reach out to one particular member of their group, not the whole flock, just that one bird. And then comes the part that stops you cold. A study led by Lauren Benedict at the University of Northern Colorado, published in 2026, examined a large dataset of parrots living with humans. 88 birds across 30 species showed what researchers called appropriate name use. They used names correctly for the right individuals. Some used different names for different members of the household. One bird would say goodnight to each flock member by name, in order, as they went to bed. Your parrot, when it calls your name from the other room, may not be showing off a trick it learned. It may be doing what parrots have always done with the members of their flock, reaching out to one specific creature in the only shared language they have found and saying, "I know you. You're mine. Where are you?" And then there is Alex's last night. On September 6, 2007, Irene Pepperberg put Alex into his cage as she did every evening. He looked at her and said what he always said at the end of the day. "You be good. See you tomorrow. I love you." She said she loved him too. He asked, "You'll be in tomorrow?" She said yes. The next morning, Alex was found dead. He was 31 years old. A cardiac event, sudden and unexpected. Whether Alex understood the words, "I love you," the way a person does, no one can say for certain. But for 30 years, he said them every single night, to one specific human, before he went to sleep. He had filed Irene Pepperberg under something that warranted the same sounds, night after night, at the end of every day. Researchers who study parrots tend to be careful with language. They say things like, "the data suggests" and "appears to indicate." But when Pepperberg was asked about those final words, she didn't reach for careful language. She said it was the worst day of her life. So put it all together, and the answer to "what does your parrot think you are" turns out to be several things at once. It thinks you are flock. The ancient part of its brain has placed you inside the circle of creatures that matter, the ones worth tracking, worth calling, worth waiting for at the door. When you leave the house and your parrot screams, that's not stubbornness. That's a flock animal watching a flock member disappear and not knowing when they're coming back. It may also think of you as something close to a social equal, not a provider, not a trainer, not an owner in any concept it would recognize. A peer, someone to address by name, someone to have a relationship with, not just a dependency on. And in some cases, in cases like Alex, cases that researchers are still working to fully understand, it may think of you as the one creature in the world it chose to say goodnight to. Every night. For 30 years. The word pet is ours. We made it up. We put it on collars and licenses and adoption papers. The parrot never agreed to any of that. But it did something else. It looked at the humans in its house, with a brain the size of a walnut and a nervous system built over millions of years for one purpose: finding its flock and staying close to it. And it decided, these strange, featherless, mostly silent creatures who can't fly and barely make any interesting sounds at all, these are mine. So tonight, when your parrot calls out from its perch and you answer, and it quiets down the moment it hears your voice, remember what's actually happening. It's not a trick. It's not training. It's a flock member checking that you're still there.